The piercing sound of the alarm clock broke the silence of the morning. It rang as usual at precisely 5. Outside, it was still dawn, only a few minutes until sunrise, and through the heavy blue hue, the first rays of the sun were already beginning to appear. It was still dark, and I didn't feel like getting up. The thick curtain of night stubbornly refused to let the dawn into the house. What was even more disheartening was the thought that most people weren't even considering waking up at this hour and were fast asleep in their warm beds, some alone, others with their loved ones or spouses, or at least with their beloved dog. I didn't have any of them, and what saddened me most was the absence of the adjective beloved in my life. I'm going to lie down for a bit longer. There won't be any supervisors this morning anyway. I can take a little longer, I thought without opening my eyes. I pulled the tapestry blanket I'd recently bought from Silva even tighter over me. These blankets were popular, although expensive, but for someone who loves comfort, it was a splendid purchase, and I was exactly that kind of person. Comfort and cleanliness in everything. Meanwhile, in my 25-year-old mind, one vivid scenario after another, as often happens in the early hours before dawn, was unfolding. I imagined a handsome man by my side, then a beloved spouse, then a passionate lover. Stop. It was already 5:10 on the clock. I jumped out of bed and found myself in the bathroom in a matter of seconds. The first thing I did was look at myself in the mirror. A beautiful girl with expressive eyes and long black hair stared back at me. They were my special pride, black curls one after the other, as if someone had carefully curled them overnight so that in the morning, the owner would have a beautiful hairstyle. I smiled at the beauty staring back at me in the mirror and started to wash. Black coffee and hot toast were my traditional breakfast. I prepared it as quickly as I got out of bed. Wearing my favorite jeans and t-shirt, I rushed out of the apartment to catch the first bus. "Hello, Olivia." The middle-aged driver greeted the first passenger with a friendly smile, as usual. "Going to Pora?" I nodded in confirmation and returned the smile. I paid and sat down next to the window, leaning against it, ready to once again sink into morning drowsiness and finish watching my dreams. At the next stop, more people began to board, and continuing my morning sleep became impossible. A bearded gentleman sat down next to me and opened a newspaper. I began to read an article about yet another increase in stock market rates with interest. Financial matters didn't interest me much, so I soon tired of it, although I wasn't a silly girl. Pora, my stop, was announced, and squeezing through the crowd, I started heading for the exit. The long bus journey had finally brought morning, and the bright sun that appeared in the sky promised beautiful weather. I was one of those people who rejoiced in every pleasant moment or event. Often, when nature deprives someone of something, they value life more and appreciate the opportunity to enjoy every moment of it. I, however, was born mute. "Hello, Olivia, you look great." A slender young man of about 20 who was walking towards me waved in greeting. It was Andrea. He worked nearby. I smiled in response and continued on my way. I was running a bit late, so I picked up the pace. "It's okay, don't worry. The manager isn't here yet," Emma replied as I tried to gesture an apology for being late. Emma was my partner. She was already in uniform and had started preparing the dining area for the customers. We both worked as cleaners at the Fresh Coffee, located in the heart of the city and a favorite spot not only for locals, but also for tourists. The cafe opened early in the morning, welcoming visitors with aromatic coffee and fresh pastries. For those who wished, they prepared ham omelets. Tourists loved coming here for breakfast, although the locals preferred to have breakfast at home. "I'll have an American coffee and your cheese bread," a typical morning guest would ask the waiter. He would then sit by the window and start watching the locals go by. It was a wonderful opportunity to observe their habits and manners, which could not fail to interest a visitor. After all, that's why they embark on journeys, to learn how people live in other countries. Outside the window, beautiful girls with vibrant makeup and revealing outfits were parading. Their outfits were so revealing that you could see what was underneath. The men, on the other hand, wore shorts and tank tops, but both groups were characterized by a passionate temperament and lively emotions that they didn't hesitate to express on the street. "Hey, has your wife given birth yet?" "Yes, 3 days ago." "Were you there for the birth?" "Of course, from start to finish." "It's great to see a new life being born. You could hear dialogue like this on the streets of this hot southern city. There were no forbidden or uncomfortable topics here. People talked about absolutely everything they lived and cared about. So, by talking to them, you could learn about their lives in the smallest detail while watching from the stained glass cafe as you enjoyed breakfast. I was a little different. My physiological handicap made me a bit closed off to communication, although everyone loved me. I was very kind. Often, among adults, you could find anger, envy, and many other unpleasant things. I had none of that. That's why everyone wanted to wish me a good day and smile when they met me. Olivia, I've already cleaned the windowsills and watered the flowers. All that's left for you to do is polish the tables until they shine, so that the customers can see their reflection in them, Emma said, as if she were my older sister. We really were close. The dark-skinned woman took on the responsibility of looking after this fragile, helpless girl, and she did it very well, especially when it came to the cafe owner. He was very arrogant and conceited, but he particularly liked to mock the weak and defenseless like me. The cafe door opened and the manager appeared in the doorway. His name was Matteo. He was the owner's right-hand man and tried to imitate him in everything, even his clothes. He wore a striped gray suit that complemented his serious demeanor. Let's work, let's work. The first guest will be arriving soon. He used to encourage the whole cafe team in the mornings with these words. This working day has begun. Matteo cast his gaze over everyone in the room at that moment, then nodded approvingly, apparently expressing his satisfaction that everyone was in their positions and fulfilling their tasks. Then he went into the kitchen. You have no idea how much I fear him. I get goosebumps every time he looks at me with that stern gaze, Emma confided. She was a newcomer and didn't have citizenship, so she was very afraid of losing her job. So she was very compliant with all the management, but she never cheated or set anyone up. I respected her a lot for that. I, on the other hand, always maintained a sense of my own dignity in everything and, under no circumstances, allowed myself to be humiliated, even when the owner shouted at me for no reason, just because he was the owner. At such times, I would stand in front of him with my head held high. This irritated him even more, making him blush like a crayfish and shout even louder. In the dining room, the waiters were already setting the tables for the arrival of the guests, while Emma and I retired to the utility room. Here were mops, hanging cloths, and various containers of chemicals used for cleaning and disinfecting. We settled down in the corner of the room, each lost in our own thoughts. You know, Olivia, I didn't come here for that. Emma broke the silence. I came here in search of a prestigious job in a beautiful office, for family happiness with a loving spouse and a bunch of kids. And in the end, I work as a cleaner and live with an alcoholic who drinks all his wages. Yes, all my dreams remain just dreams. A person shapes their own destiny, I replied with gestures. We worked together for many years, so Emma understood me perfectly well. Do you like your destiny? Is this what you wanted in life? The woman suddenly flared up. I still have everything ahead of me, I replied. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've missed something in my life. Maybe there was that lucky break that went unnoticed. Or maybe I still have it all. Isn't that right? She looked at me questioningly, and I nodded in response. Emma sighed with relief. The working day was in full swing. The cafe doors opened and closed repeatedly to let in new guests or to dismiss those who had already enjoyed the excellent cuisine. We can offer you shag, and if you like seafood, then you should try vatapá. The waiters competed to offer the best dishes from the cafe to the guests. Locals and tourists alike loved this place. It was located right in the city center, where the offices of the main companies were situated. Therefore, their employees often dropped in for lunch. Tourists, on the other hand, were attracted by the variety of local cuisine on offer at this establishment. What more does a person need when they come here for the first time, if not to enjoy the local delicacies? Usually, at this time of day, the owner would appear. He was a tall, slender man, always very representative, as he preferred business suits. His black hair was always neatly cut, and he liked to run his hand through it, adjusting his hairstyle. His name was Enrique. Are you enjoying everything here? He addressed the guests politely, with a fake smile on his face. Yes, everything is simply wonderful. Both the cuisine and the service are first class, they usually replied, feeding his vanity. He made his way to the utility room, always impeccably dressed, but failing to command respect from his employees. On the contrary, there was hatred and disgust towards him because of his despicable character. However, everyone feared him. "Where is that useless woman?" He addressed the staff. "She's in the utility room with Emma," came the reply. "During peak hours. What is she doing there?" The doors to the utility room opened, and the angry boss stood before us. Emma immediately cringed in fear. She was very scared of him, not so much because of him, but because of the possibility of losing her job. With her immigrant status, being fired meant ending up on the streets. I wasn't shaken in the slightest by the boss's presence. I looked at him questioningly. "Why are you here? Don't you have anything better to do?" Emma replied, "Sir, we prepared the hall and left so as not to disturb the guests." Emma replied, "It's time to tidy up. There's garbage and dirt on the floor. You know, it's full of guests, which means a lot of garbage, so I don't want to see you here anymore," he said, his face turning red with anger, saliva flying from his mouth. The women stood up calmly, picked up their things, and headed for the exit. "You stay," he said, gesturing to me. He closed the door behind Emma and continued with his usual business of humiliating and insulting the helpless girl. "Ungrateful creature, have you completely lost your shame? I hired you out of pity. I run a decent establishment and could have found people fully capable of working, at least not deaf like you." I gestured that I wasn't deaf, but dumb, but he didn't understand, so I took out a sheet of paper and wrote the same thing. This irritated him even more. "Rika, will you teach me?" With those words, he swung and hit me in the face. I rolled over but showed no sign of pain. I turned back to him, looking him in the eye with contempt. He swung again and hit me once more. The marks of his hand were visible on my face, and that seemed to bring him back to his senses. "All right, you're dismissed today," he said, adjusting his clothes, running a hand through his hair and leaving. Poor man, I thought. What had happened in his life that had built up so much anger inside him? I often asked myself this question, but I still didn't have an answer. I was used to humiliation. I'd faced this treatment many times in my life. "Look, the seedling is coming. Hey, seedling, say something to me. Come on, why are you silent?" Some boy would run after me at school, blocking my way. The girls were more lenient, but they still didn't like me. My only friend and support was my mother. "Olivia, you're a beauty. Don't pay attention to the others. They're jealous of you, jealous of your beauty and your intelligence," my mother encouraged me. Perhaps there was some truth in her words. I really was very beautiful. And secretly, all the boys dreamed of dating me. But they were afraid of being ridiculed by the others. And the girls were jealous. They envied my black curly hair and my handsome features that made me a real beauty. My mother was long gone, but she managed to instill in me important qualities: self-confidence and resilience, qualities that would help me navigate this difficult world. I went into the salon to join Emma in cleaning. "Did he hit you again?" Emma noticed the redness on my face. "I'm fine," I replied, gesturing, and we continued cleaning the hall without disturbing the guests or causing them any inconvenience. "Olivia, how are you?" I turned and saw Andrea behind me, the same young man I had met earlier in the morning. I nodded politely and, so as not to attract the attention of the boss, who had been in the hall all this time, I continued cleaning up. Andrea handed me a note and sat down to lunch. He worked in the office next door and came here almost every day. The young man had noticed me for a long time. He immediately caught my eye, and now he was trying to get my attention in every possible way. He even started learning sign language. The note said, "I'll wait for you in the lobby at the end of the day." "What do you think?" Emma asked when I showed her the note. I shrugged. What else is there to think about? Such a presentable young man working in an office. It's obvious that he's very polite and likes you very much. "He only comes to our cafe because of you," Emma instructed me. But I remained silent. I had long since realized that I liked Andrea, but unfortunately I couldn't brag about it. Yes, he was a very nice guy, but nothing more. That held me back. What if I couldn't reciprocate? I was afraid of giving him hope, so I ignored every sign of his attention. But this time, Emma was categorical. "Don't even think about refusing. You can just talk to him. It doesn't commit you to anything. You're a beautiful young woman. You have to communicate with men. Besides, remember our morning conversation. What if this is your destiny? Don't miss it. These words had the strongest effect on me. In fact, communicating with Andrea didn't commit me to anything. And I missed male attention, just as any young woman my age would miss attention and affection if she were single. When I left the cafe at the end of the day, Andrea was already waiting for me in the lobby. It was 10 p.m., and the streets were visibly empty, but you could still find tourists or young couples strolling around. Tired, Andrea looked at me questioningly. I reached for my bag to write an answer, but the young man stopped me. You can use gestures. I looked at him in surprise. Don't be surprised. I've been learning sign language for a while and I already understand a few things, so we're communicating through gestures. I live far away on the outskirts of the city in the Silva area, he said. No problem. I'm totally free until the morning, Andrea joked. He was happy that I had finally agreed to meet him and was ready for anything, even the most absurd actions. It was written all over her face, and her words made me feel very happy. I wasn't used to male attention, or rather, I didn't have any. Yes, I was attractive, but as soon as young men realized that I had a flaw, they immediately gave up their intentions. Andrea was the first to dare to start a relationship with me. Is someone waiting for you at home? I asked him. No, I live alone. I have an apartment in Molina. It must be very nice there. Yes, we have very modern architecture and lots of greenery. My windows overlook the famous Jardine Park. I've never been there. Then I invite you. I looked at him skeptically. No, of course, not now. Whenever you like. The young people were walking to the bus stop, continuing their pleasant conversation. Andrea was beaming with happiness. She kept making jokes and telling me funny stories to impress me. I was happy that Andrea was such a nice person, and I enjoyed talking to him. Do you need help getting home? Andrea asked. No, thanks. It's already late. You need to go home and rest before a new working day, I replied. Andrea didn't object. He really was terribly tired, and this brief interaction was enough to make him feel almost happy. Home, Olivia? The same driver from the morning asked. I nodded and settled down next to the window, wanting to savor the pleasant feelings I had after my walk with Andrea. The bus carried the latecomers who were anxious to get home quickly, making it peaceful on board, allowing passengers to indulge in their thoughts. The next morning, I woke up to the alarm clock, but this time I didn't stay in bed too long because I had a morning appointment with Andrea, and I didn't want to miss it. Hello, Olivia. I've heard the familiar greeting, but today it brought me much more pleasure. I hope everything is fine with you, Andrea asked. I nodded and smiled in response. I'll wait for you in the evening. The young man's words sounded so firm that I didn't object this time. I wasn't late, and Emma had no reason to scold me. We got down to our usual work and started preparing the hall for the guests. Suddenly, the cafe door opened and the owner walked in. He never came this early, so his appearance surprised everyone. Why are you looking as if you've seen the devil? Don't you recognize the owner? You're all going mad. I'll tell Peter to be more strict with you. I'll give you 10 minutes. A very important guest will be arriving soon and everything must be impeccable, he said before disappearing into his office. The whole team got busy in anticipation of the big guest mentioned by the owner, and he didn't keep them waiting long. Is this where I'm supposed to celebrate my 70th birthday? A distinguished old man appeared in the doorway of the cafe. Dad, I've been waiting for you. Andrea stepped forward to meet the old man. He was the boss's father. His name was Francisco. In his dealings with others, he was as unpleasant as his son. Not bad, not bad. I finally found a comfortable place to celebrate my jubilee. I suggested this option immediately. Yes, indeed, you were right. Although, honestly, I didn't think you could manage the business competently. You never believed me, because you're incompetent. Surely you invited a bunch of designers here to create something like this. No, it's all Angela's doing. Just her ideas and creative approach. I never thought I'd say this, but your wife definitely has good taste. She's really talented, Enrique replied, truly loving his wife. We should invite your mother here so that she can see with her feminine gaze and order from the menu. Yes, Dad. Trust Mom. She'll do everything right. The celebration was planned for a month later. Enrique was an exemplary son, the kind who tries to please his parents, especially his father. But not because he loved him very much. He harbored an animal fear, the fear of being humiliated and insulted. It had been in him since childhood, from the moment Enrique witnessed the humiliation of his mother, Lucia. "What kind of poison did you serve me for breakfast? Do you want to get rid of me as quickly as possible? No, I never even thought of such a thing. You bastard, you dare argue with me? Taste what's on my plate yourself." The man grabbed the woman by the hair and shoved her face into her breakfast. She burst into tears and ran to the next room. From this incident, which became his first conscious memory, the boy witnessed his father's mistreatment of his mother. "Mom, why does Dad treat you like that?" Enrique asked once. "Darling, your father gets very tired at work, so sometimes he loses control. Don't pay any attention. Your father is a good person," she replied. "He always defended her husband and never showed his weakness to his son." Lucia didn't want Enrique to become as vulnerable as she was. But the scenes of humiliation and cruelty couldn't help but affect the boy's character. The loss of control soon spread to Enrique. His father began to raise his hand at him for the slightest mistake. "Son, how are things at school?" "Fine." "What do you mean, fine? Explain yourself." "Behavior? Grades?" "Everything is fine." "I'd like a specific answer." "My grades are fine." "Is anyone bullying you at school?" "Yes. I never thought my son would become a victim. Never dare give in to anyone. Stand up for yourself," the father said, swinging and hitting his son full force before the boy could dodge, catching the blow and falling. "What are you doing? He's your son." Lucia ran to help her son, but the man immediately dragged her away. "Don't meddle in men's affairs. Know your place." With those words, he hit the woman. "Mama!" Enrique shouted, trying to protect her from the enraged father, but he pushed me away like a kitten and continued to hit the woman. The 7-year-old child was powerless against the adult man. This hurt him even more. He realized that he couldn't protect his mother from the tyrant. Enrique grew up in this environment. Over time, violence became quite commonplace for him, and he intervened less and less for his mother. He even got used to being regularly beaten by his father. After all, he was very tired from work. But let's get back to me, who was already hurrying to meet Andrea. "Do you remember that you invited me to Jardine Park?" I asked, gesturing. "Of course I remember," Andrea gestured back confidently. He understood that our relationship was developing, since I was interested in this place. "I'd like to visit there. But for now, tell me about the park," I asked. "Ah, it's a very picturesque place. It can fairly be called a small country with its own fauna and flora. You can see rare animals here, which are hardly found in the wild, and the bright colors of the rich flora will dazzle you. There are always many people here, but everyone can find something to enjoy." "What animals can you see here?" I asked. I loved all kinds of animals and had long wanted to own one. "White swans. Do you like these animals? I can watch them swimming on the surface of the water for hours and notice that they're not bothered by anything. It's as if they were in a mirror. And how graceful they are. Yes, it's hard to disagree with that. We could sit on the lawn, take some snacks, and spend the whole day watching them. That's a great idea. Let's do it soon." I began to realize that we had a lot in common. We liked the same things. Andrea, like me, cherished every moment that this rich world offered. I still couldn't find any fault with it. Nothing irritated me. That was the richness of communication that Mourinho had talked about. In fact, nothing could replace it. You could spend hours doing what you loved, but if you didn't have anyone to share your feelings with, the joy became fleeting. Andrea was on cloud 9. My lack of perfection didn't bother him at all. He didn't even seem to notice. After all, he had almost mastered sign language, overcoming all the obstacles that could have hindered our communication. So after pleasant conversations, he accompanied me to the bus stop, where we said goodbye until the next day. Finally, the day of the anniversary arrived. Enrique had been bustling around the cafe since early morning, making sure everything was in order and nothing was forgotten. "Mateo, has the seafood arrived?" he asked. "Yes, boss." "Everything is here," Mateo replied. "And the fresh flowers? My father likes them freshly cut." "Yes, they'll be delivered any minute." "The tablecloths must be spotless and make sure the plates are polished to perfection." Otherwise, none of us will have any peace. My father is terrifying when he's angry. Enrique laughed. His words amused him, but Mateo was in no mood for jokes. It looks so elegant here. The first guest who entered the hall immediately complimented the interior of the cafe. And what fashionable furniture made of hardwood, others added. In fact, the cafe underwent significant changes before the anniversary. With the help of his wife and mother, Enrique made some changes, even acquiring new furniture that now matched the cafe's color scheme perfectly. The chairs had wrought iron legs, adding elegance. Glass partitions completed the overall picture. These changes added to the grandeur of the upcoming event. Well done, son. I knew I could count on you, Francisco said after examining the hall. It was clear that he was pleased with the changes that had taken place over the last month. Don't mention it, Dad. Thank our women instead. Francisco approached his wife to kiss her, but Lucia turned her face away. What's wrong? Her husband asked. Nothing, it's just not appropriate. There are a lot of guests here. The hall was indeed full, and the birthday boy had to sit with many friends and relatives, which he promptly did. A festive atmosphere filled the hall. Handsome and enthusiastic guests repeatedly approached Francis to congratulate him and share a glass of wine. Only 2 people felt particularly tense that day. Enrique was worried that everything would go well, while Lucia was about to take a very serious step that would change her whole life. Lucia, why aren't you eating anything? Are you feeling unwell? Francisco noticed that his wife hadn't touched her food. No, I'm not ill. I just don't feel like eating. I don't understand. Are you doing this on purpose? What exactly? You're annoying me. We're not going to do that today or here. Francisco calmed down a little and turned his attention to the guests. Conversations flowed around the lively table, interrupted only by the clinking of glasses and beautiful congratulations to the birthday boy. Everything went according to plan. The waiters worked in the hall, and Emma and I popped in from time to time to clear up the accumulated garbage. Few people paid any attention to us, but we made sure we didn't miss anything. The guests had to be served promptly and efficiently. Can I offer you some more wine? Would you like some seafood snacks? It echoed throughout the night. The guests were satisfied. Francisco couldn't help but notice, but he belonged to the category of people who were very sparing with compliments. His relatives didn't expect it from him. Even less did Lucia want to hear pleasant words from him that evening. After many years of humiliation and insults, she had finally decided to divorce him. Her son was now grown up and on his own. He would certainly understand and accept her decision. After all, he had witnessed all the atrocities his father had committed, and she had endured these humiliations for the sake of her son, so that he would grow up in a complete family and lack nothing. Yes, he would understand. My son wasn't like his father. She had tried to ensure that there was as little malice and hatred in him as possible. When the guests began to disperse, I took Francisco to a utility room so that no one could overhear our conversation. It was the same place where the cleaning supplies were kept and where Emma and I occasionally rested. What did you want to tell me? Francisco began to flirt with me, slightly drunk and relaxed. He came close to kissing me, but I stopped him. Francisco, I want to have a serious conversation with you. So serious that you don't want to kiss your husband? He tried to pull me towards him again, but I ducked. I want a divorce, I said seriously and confidently. Francisco still didn't understand the meaning of the words he'd heard. He took me by the hand and looked at me with a perplexed look. For a moment, it was possible to forget everything and run back into his arms, but I had already made up my mind. I'm leaving you, I said more confidently now. Where are you going? Francisco continued jokingly, still not understanding the seriousness of the situation. I've already filed for divorce. What divorce? You're joking, darling. You must be tired. The guests will be leaving soon and we'll go home. Just listen to me. I'm finally leaving you. I don't want to put up with your humiliations any longer. I've had enough. Lucia couldn't contain herself any longer. What did you say? You're leaving me? Francisco was beginning to wake up a little and understand what was happening. Yes. And after all I've done for you, after so many years together, you've never lacked for anything. I did everything so that our family could live comfortably. Francisco was beginning to boil with anger. I don't need anything from you, I replied calmly. And you won't get anything, you ungrateful creature. Not even a divorce. No one has ever left me. I have proof of your cruelty. Photographs, hospital records, witnesses. They'll believe me. They'll grant the divorce even without your consent. Oh, I see. Proof. You've decided to put me behind bars?" With those words, Francisco lunged forward and grabbed me by the neck with both hands. His face turned red with rage as he began to choke me. I tried to break free by grabbing his hands, but Francisco was much stronger. I was already starting to suffocate when Olivia entered the utility room. Without thinking twice, she immediately ran over to us and tried to pull Francisco away, but he was much stronger than her. What's more, he was in a state where a person could commit anything crazy. I jumped on him from behind, hoping to distract him, but Francisco threw me like a kitten. I flew into the corner and hit the wall, momentarily unconscious. But I quickly regained consciousness and started looking for something to stun him. I saw a container with some liquid in it and immediately grabbed it. I flew towards Francisco and hit him on the head with the container. The man fell immediately, blood dripping from his head. Frightened, I ran out of the utility room and fled. Enrique had been in the lounge all this time. He wasn't drinking because he needed to oversee the progress of the celebration, spend time with all his father's friends and comrades, but he wasn't forgetting his family either. Although his friends seemed to have disappeared somewhere, he had to say goodbye to the guests on his own. "Have you seen my father?" he asked Mateo, who had been in the hall the whole time. "No, I lost sight of him a long time ago. And my mother is missing too." Suddenly, Enrique's father entered the hall. He was staggering and holding a bleeding wound on his head. "Dad, what happened?" Enrique exclaimed in horror, running to his father. "Where's Mom?" His father could barely speak. All he could do was point a finger at me, who appeared in the hall after him. I approached the host and gestured to indicate that I was responsible for what had happened. The restaurant called the police. Lucia had been in the utility room all this time. She sat in the corner of the room, feeling distressed. "Mom, what happened?" Her son ran over to her and saw the bruises on her neck. Enrique understood everything instantly, and at that moment, fear enveloped him. He feared the extreme that he feared most. He had lived his whole life in fear that one day, in a fit of rage, his father would simply kill his mother, and it had almost happened. If it hadn't been for Olivia, who had also been mistreated just as her father had mistreated her mother, how much courage there would have been in that fragile, mute girl. It took some time for the police to get a coherent statement from Lucia. Fortunately, cameras were installed in all areas of the cafe, so reproducing the events wasn't difficult. Enrique, reviewing these recordings and especially hearing how his father covered his beloved mother in dirt and filth, couldn't hold back the tears. Memories of his childhood, which he had tried to forget for so long, resurfaced before his eyes. I approached him, gesturing to communicate and asking for forgiveness, but the man suddenly fell to his knees, hugged my legs, and burst into tears. "Well, finally, I've been waiting for you, as usual." Andrea greeted me at the university entrance. "Helping someone again?" "Yes. A teacher asked me to," I replied with gestures. "Well, you can't be too helpful. Think of yourself or me. Finally, I've been waiting for an answer from you for 3 years." I looked at him and gently kissed him. Yes, for 3 long years, Andrea had been waiting for my response to her marriage proposal. I wasn't turning her down, not really. It's just that lately, my life has undergone such significant changes that I simply didn't have time to take another decisive step. Everything changed after that terrible day. Enrique, the owner of the ill-fated cafe, helped me get into university. It was his way of thanking me for saving his mother. Since then, my life has taken a new turn. I was an intelligent girl, so I studied with enthusiasm. The teachers, seeing my potential and commitment, tried to help me in every way possible. And all this time, my beloved was by my side. "We're having lunch at Lucia's today, haven't you forgotten?" asked Andrea, and we hurried along so as not to be late. The couple rang the apartment bell. Lucia appeared at the door. In that time, her life had also changed. Her husband was in prison, and she was starting a new life, with new thoughts, new desires, in a new environment. "I'm so happy to see you." The woman couldn't hide her emotions and burst into tears. The old wound still hadn't healed, and she often gave in to her feelings. "Hello, Lucia. We're very happy too," Andrea said. We went inside, And while Lucia busied herself with lunch and setting the table, we continued our conversation. Olivia, what more do I need to do to finally make a decision? What are you talking about? Lucia asked, noticing that we were discussing something. Oh, nothing much, Andrea replied. I also have a proposal today that Olivia probably won't refuse, but first I'd like to invite you to the table. Everything is ready, Lucia said. We sat down at the table and over lunch chatted animatedly like old friends. Lucia and I had really become close friends. We had a lot in common, both in destiny and character. Olivia, I have a proposal for you, Lucia unexpectedly interrupted our casual conversation. I looked at her questioningly. Enrique and I are opening a center to help victims of domestic violence, and we'd like you to co-found it. An unexpected proposal. I replied with sign language. I'm not asking you to answer now. Think about it. Yes, let's think about it, Andrea replied. Exactly 1 month had passed since that meeting. I agreed to become a co-founder, and today would be the grand opening of the new center. Olivia, I'm so nervous. This is a very important event for me. I've endured humiliation for a long time, so I want as few people as possible to go through what I went through, Lucia said. Everything will work out. You're doing everything right, I replied. At that moment, Enrique approached. From day one, he had helped his mother realize this idea. All the financial support came from him. Mom, how are you? She asked. I'm nervous, darling, Lucia replied. You're doing everything right, he said, and then turned to me, who was standing a little away so as not to get in the way. How's our savior? He asked. Fine, I nodded. How are your studies? I smiled and indicated that I was really enjoying it. Thank you. Thank you. If it hadn't been for your courage, I could have lost the most precious person. I'll be eternally grateful to you for that, said Enrique. Lucia, it's time to start. The administrator interrupted our conversation. The guests have already gathered. Yes, I'm ready. Olivia. Come with me, said Lucia. I was surprised by the sudden summons. Of course, you're a co-founder of the center, so you belong on stage. When we took to the stage, we were momentarily blinded by the spotlights, but the enthusiastic applause quickly reassured us. We approached the microphone, and Lucia addressed the audience. I am very happy to welcome all of you here today in this room for the inauguration of our center. I believe I am doing something very important. For a long time, I was a victim of domestic violence, and I know this firsthand. Next to me is a person to whom I owe my salvation. This girl's name is Olivia, and like me, she will co-found the center, and together we can help thousands of people. This girl is mute, but I believe she has something to say today. After these words, I approached the microphone and gestured. Yes, I accept. A man sitting in the front row stood up and shouted to the whole room, She accepts. She agrees to marry me. No one needed any explanations about those words. The whole room stood up and started applauding. Whether it was for Lucia, for her noble initiative, or for the young couple who were about to become a family, it didn't matter. What mattered was that everything we do has a happy ending.